many of you have heard of mummies and pharaohs from Egypt? How many of you have heard of King Tut? Not the kind from the movies, though. We're not talking about that right now. Mummies, they leave this impact. They leave, themselves. So we know King Tut because his mummy is here. And is that something that everybody wants? You know, to be known years and years after you're already gone? It doesn't always happen immediately, though, especially for this case. I've done a good amount of research about King Tut. I also had to take Intro to Anthropology, which we have learned about him in that class. My teachers taught about him, and he wasn't as popular as he is today. He wasn't as well known. And today, I'll be explaining why King Tut is better known today than he was in the past. The reasons for that is because of what was found in the tomb, when they found him and when they found his tomb, and then how his life was in the past and how he was treated. First, let's take a look inside of King Tut, inside of his tomb. There are many intact artifacts that were found inside of his tomb. But according to Jarrett Lobel, she's an archaeologist. She also writes for a journalist for Archaeology magazine. She wrote that King Tut's tomb was really small. Very small, especially for a pharaoh. And yet, they were still able to fit everything that pharaoh needed, all the artifacts that he needed, inside of that tomb. You might wonder why he's a pharaoh, right? Why is his tomb so small? His death was very unplanned. He was young, it was unplanned, and they weren't finished with his original tomb at first. So they just shoved him inside of a tomb that they made very fast, finished very fast. When that tomb was excavated, they found all these amazing, crazy, still intact artifacts, grave goods, that were still in their place, all in their place. You see the markers, they're still all in their place, and they're all put together and intact. It's a little messy because of how rushed it was, how rushed of a job it was, but it's still all there and intact. The most famous one, though, one of the most famous artifacts that was found was his death mask, 24-pound solid gold of King Tut's face, right there. That's what was on his mummy when they found him. Pretty cool. And almost all the other artifacts, writing equipment, musical instruments, games, weapons, little tiny ships were found intact inside of this tomb, all in here, and in other little different areas. But not just the artifacts and stuff, all the artifacts, not just that was intact. The tomb itself was still intact, as well as the walls in his actual burial tomb were still intact. All four walls that were in there were still intact. One of the most famous images right here that's still intact. It depicts King Tut's journey to the afterlife. So right here, he's being hugged by the god Osiris, the god of death, basically. And it's a pretty amazing feat to have this still intact. They also were able to find that the tomb itself had four coffins, solid gold, all fitted within each other, with King Tut right inside of there, with the death mask on. There's another picture right there that shows just how much there was. And after, you figured, they found it nearly 100 years ago, but 100 million visitors. So the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities were very nervous about the condition that it was in at the moment. So when they went to go try and safeguard it, they found, it's still in pretty good condition, which is pretty amazing feat. Never had any previous tomb that had been found had so much stuff still intact inside of it, and out of the walls intact. It had nothing taken. Now that we've talked about what was inside his tomb, all that stuff, that's why we all know him so well, is because everything that was found is still intact. Let's talk about what his life was like. And that's really where we get to why he wasn't so popular. But before that, we need to talk about all the pharaohs that came before him, his ancestors. Because although he did not do anything significant, really, his ancestors did. According to David Walton, my anthropology professor, he's a professional archaeologist. He teaches archaeology, anthropology, he does all of that, what he taught. And all these pictures I show you are from his PowerPoint that I got permission from him to show. And according to him, Amenhotep II is Tut's, that they've, are suspecting Tut's great-great-great-grandfather. He wanted to end the war that was happening. He wanted peace. He made a promise to everyone that he was going to achieve peace. And it wasn't until his son, Thutmose IV, sorry, let me backtrack. It wasn't his son. It was like great son. King Tut's supposed uncle, his father's brother, King Tut's father's brother, Thutmose IV, that he actually attained that peace. He was able to keep that peace throughout his whole reign until he died unexpectedly, which kind of happens a lot, especially back then. So Thutmose, he attains that peace, but then he dies. So what happens? His brother, Amenhotep IV, King Tut's father, becomes pharaoh, although he was not well-liked at all. He ruled for 17 years, and he ended up changing the state religion of Egypt, which is big no-no. You don't want to do that. He ended up closing all the temples of the gods that had been, worshipped, and he transferred all of that to the god that he created, the sun god, Aten. Sorry. Which, just don't do that. In the 5th year of his reign, he changed his name to Akhenaten to, support his god, the god that he created. And according to Professor David Walton, he moved the capital of Egypt to a new city called, with his same name, Akhenaten. Sorry. And all of that was known as the Amarna heresy, and people of Egypt despised it. They hated that change. They did not like it at all. So, when Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten, died, King Tut became pharaoh. Sorry. And unlike his predecessors, his ancestors, he didn't really do anything significant, good or bad. He did, with the advice, he was very young. He was very, very young when he became pharaoh. And he listened mostly to his 2 advisors, Ai and Harumba. He ended up reversing all the changes that his father had made due to their advice. But at that point, the damage had already been done. He wasn't well liked at all by the people either. He reopened all the temples and moved the capital back to Waset. And then he died after only fewer than 10 years ruling as pharaoh, which is very young. And he had no heir, and his successor, his advisor, Ai, had no heir either. So there had to be a new line of kings, line of pharaohs, and they decided, we don't really want this black mark on our history at the moment, so they didn't want it to be remembered at all. So they erased King Tut. These are all the pharaohs. They erased King Tut from the history, from the annals of history. So everyone forgot. He was not remembered at all, which also served for him to be remembered later on, because he wasn't remembered, he wasn't talked about at all, no one knew who he was, no one knew to ransack his tomb. Because all the other tombs had been looted and stolen from, they didn't know who the guy was. So they couldn't ransack. So it basically ensured his own immortality, that he would be known in the future and that we would know him all. Now, it can be easy to think about King Tut whenever we think of mummies in Egypt, but there was a time where no one knew who he was. And the reasons for that was because we know now because of what was found in his tomb exactly, and no one knew who he was back then because he didn't do anything significant. He was treated, he wasn't treated like a pharaoh should have been. Thank you so much.